Someone is standing in a bathroom. It's morning. The light is the kind that doesn't apologize. And they're looking at their face, not in a vain way, not examining, just looking, when their eyes drop almost involuntarily to their feet. They're standing on a cold tile floor, both feet flat. Something about the way their weight is sitting there, slightly forward, slightly uneven, makes them shift. And when they shift, something moves. Not their face, but something moves. That's where this starts. Not at the mirror, at the floor. There are two ways to think about what happens to a face over time. The first way, the obvious way, the one we've all been handed, is that the face is its own story. Skin loses collagen, muscles weaken, gravity pulls. The interventions, logically, happen at the face. Creams applied from above, exercises performed in the mirror, procedures targeting the tissue directly. The face as a closed system, self-contained problem, localized solution. The second way is less intuitive, much less. It says the face is not a closed system at all. It says the face is the top floor of a very tall building, and what you do on the ground floor, and specifically at the foundation, changes the load every floor above it has to carry. Both of these models are real. Both have practitioners, evidence, reasoning behind them. And I'm not here to tell you the first is wrong. I want to show you what the second explains that the first can't. Because there is something the second model explains that once you see it, changes the question you're asking when you stand in that bathroom light. The structure we're talking about has a name. Anatomists call it the superficial back line. It's a continuous sheet of connective tissue, fascia primarily, that runs without interruption from the soles of your feet to the ridge of your brow. Not metaphorically continuous, anatomically continuous. The plantar fascia on the underside of your foot thickens into the Achilles tendon. The Achilles connects to the gastrocnemius, the hamstrings, the sacrotuberous ligament at the base of your pelvis, the erector muscles running up your spine, the suboccipital fascia at the base of your skull, and then it fans forward over the top of your head into the Galea Aponeurotica. The same connective tissue layer that covers your heel covers your forehead. That's not a metaphor, that's anatomy. What the superficial back line does, under normal circumstances with adequate movement, is distribute tension evenly. Load goes in at one end, gets shared across the whole length. The system is designed for variability. It's designed for walking on uneven ground, for climbing, for the full range of ankle motion that humans used for most of our history. What it was not designed for is the same compressed position day after day for decades. And here is where the contrast between the two models becomes specific. Model A, the face as isolated system, asks, what is happening at the tissue level in the face? And it has good answers. Collagen degradation, reduced elasticity, volume loss in the fat pads. These are real phenomena and real answers. Model B asks a different question. It asks, what is the tensional state of the full structure the face sits atop? And what's been pulling on it from below? The answers diverge considerably. Most adults, and I say most because the research on ankle mobility in sedentary populations is reasonably consistent. Most adults over 40 have significant restriction in their ankle joint range of motion. Not from injury, from accumulated disuse. Shoes that immobilize the subtalar joint. Chairs that park the foot in a narrow static position for 6 to 8 hours. Surfaces that are always flat, always predictable, always the same. When an ankle loses circumduction, the full circular rotation it's capable of, something else compensates. That compensation travels up the superficial back line. The calf fascia tightens, the hamstrings shorten. The thoracolumbar fascia on the back of the pelvis increases its resting tension. And that tension doesn't stop at the sacrum. It continues upward. The suboccipital muscles at the base of your skull are among the first to reflect chronic posterior chain tension. They're small, postural, and they never get a break if the chain below them is always pulling. And above the suboccipitals, connected through the same fascial layer, is the Galea. the broad, flat sheet of tissue that sits over your skull like a cap. When the Galea is under chronic downward tension, the soft tissue of the face, which hangs from it more than most people realize, is under chronic downward tension too. This is what the second model sees that the first doesn't address. A guitar string tuned too tight at the peg. The note at the other end is distorted. A river delta choked at its mouth. The whole watershed backs up. Flash comparisons both, but the directional logic is the same. I want to tell you about something I've come across more than once in practice. Not a specific person, a pattern. Someone who spent a long time, 2 years roughly, working on their face. Not obsessively, but consistently. Good skincare, facial massage, the kind of diligent attention that people bring when something matters to them. Modest results, frustrating plateau. Then, separately, because a knee was bothering them, they started doing ankle mobility work. Not for their face, for the knee. A physical therapist had given them a series of exercises, and one of them was ankle circumduction. Slow, deliberate circles, daily. The rotation in the knee improved. That was the point. But then something else happened. Something they weren't tracking, weren't expecting, weren't able to explain at first. The tired pool around their eyes was different. Not gone, different. They didn't connect it to the ankle work for weeks. When they mentioned it, almost in passing, in a clinical context, the connection to the superficial backline was what made sense of it. The ankle work had changed the resting tension of the posterior chain, and that change had traveled, the way tension always travels through continuous structures, all the way to the top. That is not a transformation story, it's an observation, and I think it's worth taking seriously. Now let's press on the comparative evidence more directly, because this is where the two models diverge most sharply and where the honest comparison matters most. If you approach facial appearance using model A, you have a range of interventions available. Surface treatments, retinoids, peptides, collagen-stimulating skincare. Work at the cellular level and have genuinely good evidence behind them, particularly for skin texture and quality. Facial exercises have a tradition going back decades, and some recent research, a small but notable 2018 study out of Northwestern, found measurable improvement in perceived age after a consistent program. And surgical or procedural options, when performed well, address volume, position, and structural support directly. These interventions are real. I'm not going to tell you they don't work, because some of them do, but here's what the comparative analysis reveals. Every surface level intervention faces a version of the same challenge. It's addressing the output without addressing the input. If the tensional state of the superficial backline remains unchanged, if the ankle restriction that's been sending compressive force upward for 20 years continues unchanged, then the tissue you've treated is still under load. The improvement happens at the surface. The structural pull continues underneath. It doesn't mean the intervention was wasted. It means the improvement has a ceiling the practitioner cannot see because they're only looking at one floor of the building. Surgical lifts are the sharpest example. The research on long-term outcomes after facelift procedures consistently shows that results are best maintained in patients with good resting muscle tone and, here I'm going from surgical observation literature, better axial posture. The ones who maintain results longest are not just well preserved genetically, they move differently. Their posterior chain is less compressed. That's not a coincidence. Model B doesn't replace any of this. It adds a layer the other model doesn't address. And adding that layer costs 2 minutes. Let me describe what this looks like in practice. Because there isn't one version of this. There are a few, depending on your situation. If you're doing this in the morning, before you fully loaded the posterior chain for the day, you have the most access to change. The fascia is slightly more pliable after the relative stillness of sleep, before the hours of static loading begin. Someone standing at a kitchen counter, waiting for a kettle, both feet on the floor. They begin lifting one foot, just slightly, and rotating the ankle through its full range. Not fast, slow enough to feel where it catches, where it resists, where the circle wants to become an oval. They stay in the resistant zones a breath longer. The other foot, then back. 20 circles, each direction, each ankle. It takes less time than the kettle. If balance is a concern, and for many people over 65 or 70 it genuinely is, this works identically seated. Both feet flat on the floor. One foot lifts just the heel, the toes remain down, and the ankle traces its circle against the resistance of gravity. The same resistance zones, the same deliberate pace, the same bilateral attention. The seated version is not a lesser version. What changes is the chain. Slowly, not dramatically the first day, but consistently, the plantar fascia begins to soften at its insertion point. The Achilles, with repeated circumduction, gets input it hasn't had. The calf fascia, which has been a one-note structure for years, starts to differentiate. And that differentiation travels. How far up it travels and how quickly depends on how long the restriction has been accumulating. Someone with years of ankle compression and minimal movement history may notice changes that take weeks to become visible at the face. Someone with moderate restriction and reasonable baseline movement may notice faster. This is why the contextual variable matters. If you're already mobile and this feels easy, the value is in consistency, not intensity. If the ankle catches significantly, if the rotation is genuinely limited, that's information, and the daily practice is the experiment. I've been thinking about why it took me a long time to talk about this connection explicitly. I work in preventive health. I think about the body as a continuous structure constantly. But the gap between knowing that the superficial backline exists and naming it as a practical tool for facial appearance, that gap felt larger than it was. The word facial rejuvenation carries a certain cultural weight. It points to specific industries, specific expectations. And I didn't want to add noise to a conversation that already has too much of it. But this isn't noise. This is plumbing. This is the actual structure. The face you see in the morning light is the top of something that starts at the floor. What I feel when I sit with the comparative analysis, when I hold Model A and Model B next to each other and look at what each one sees, is genuine gratitude for everyone who takes their body seriously enough to investigate it. That sounds simple. It is simple. But the people watching this are not passive about their health. They read, they question, they've been burned by oversimplification and they keep going anyway. That persistence is worth acknowledging. The ankle rotation won't solve everything. I want to be honest about that. The evidence for the full mechanism is anatomically solid, but the specific chain of visible change at the face involves variables. Your baseline mobility, your age, your existing connective tissue quality, how the rest of your movement life looks. Some people will feel a difference quickly. Others will notice it over months, in the same way the person I described didn't connect the change to the ankle work for weeks. But here's what I know. The superficial backline is real. The continuous fascial connection from plantar surface to brow ridge is real. The mechanical logic of what happens when the bottom of a continuous structure gains or loses mobility is real. And 2 minutes is genuinely 2 minutes. So here is the ritual. When you brush your teeth in the morning, not before, not as a separate project, when the toothbrush is already in your hand, both feet come to the floor deliberately. The first ankle lifts slightly and begins its circle. Slow, attentive to the catches, both directions, both ankles. By the time the 2 minutes of brushing are done, the work is done. The toothbrush is your trigger. The morning is your anchor. The rotation follows the brush, every morning, without exception. Not because one morning will transform anything, but because the superficial backline doesn't respond to intensity, it responds to consistency. A river doesn't change course from one hard rain. It changes course from the same water, flowing, day after day, in the same direction. And the floor you stand on every morning is where that direction begins. I'm genuinely grateful you stayed with this. Not because you watched, because you're the kind of thinker who doesn't stop at the mirror. There's more to understand here, more threads this opens than it closes. And I hope the questions it leaves you with are the interesting kind. If this channel goes somewhere useful for you, that's enough.